In the summer of 1978, arcade operators across Japan started noticing something strange. Machines were filling up faster than they could be emptied. Lines wrapped around storefronts. Cafe owners pulled out their tables and replaced them with a single game on a loop. The game was called Space Invaders. It had been on the market for less than 3 months. Within a year, it would become the highest-grossing arcade game ever made. Within a decade, the men who built it from scratch, who designed the hardware, wrote the code, and drew every pixel alone, would be quietly promoted into management and largely forgotten by the industry he created. Another empire, another case. Here's what really happened. Pull back to 1953, Tokyo. A Ukrainian Jewish refugee named Michael Kogan registers a company called Taito Trading. Kogan had lived through more history than most people read about. Born in Ukraine, educated in Japan, then Shanghai during the war. When Mao's forces took China in 1949, he got out. He landed in Tokyo with connections, ambition, and an instinct for finding gaps in a recovering economy. His first product was vodka. Taito Trading became the first company to distill and sell vodka in Japan. The name Taito itself was a signal. The characters he chose meant Judah and East, a Jewish man's marker on a company built in the Far East. The vodka business didn't last, so Kogan pivoted to vending machines, then jukeboxes. He bought broken down units discarded by US military bases, repaired them, and resold them. By 1960, Taito was the official Japanese distributor of AMI jukeboxes. The pattern he established, find the gap, move fast, pivot before the market does, would define Taito for the next 3 decades. By 1973, when the gap shifted to video games, Taito was ready. Their first video game, Elapong, was a Pong clone. They weren't ashamed of it. They were studying the technology, learning how the machines worked, so they could eventually build something of their own. That something arrived in 1978, and it came from one man working alone. Tomohiro Nishikado was the only person at Taito who understood microcomputers. Management had handed the entire project to him. What they didn't tell him was that the hardware he needed to build the game didn't exist yet. He was going to have to invent it. Nishikado spent 18 months on Space Invaders. Not 18 months designing a game, 18 months building the machine that could run the game he wanted to make. He taught himself microprocessor architecture from American technical manuals, translating them with English. He designed custom circuitry from scratch. He built his own development tools because professional tools cost the equivalent of $100,000, and Taito couldn't authorize the expense. His original concept used human soldiers as enemies. He scrapped it. Shooting people didn't feel right. Around that time, Star Wars was generating conversation in Japan, and H.G. Wells's War of the Worlds had been part of the imagination since childhood. The enemies became aliens. Octopuses, crabs, squids, drawn and pixel constrained by the limits of the hardware he had just built. Space Invaders launched in July 1978. Taito management had been more excited about another game at the same event. Space Invaders was almost an afterthought. By the end of 1978, it had grossed the equivalent of $3.3 billion in today's money in Japan alone. Entire cafes converted their floor space to Space Invaders tables. Demand outpaced every projection Taito had. A story spread and kept spreading for decades. That Space Invaders caused a national shortage of 100 yen coins. That the game drained Japan's currency supply and forced the Mint to triple production. It became one of the most repeated facts in gaming history. It wasn't true. Japan had changed the metal composition of the 100 yen coin years earlier. People began hoarding the older silver coins to melt them down for their metal value. The Mint increased production to compensate for hoarding, not arcade machines. Space Invaders just happened to launch at the same time. The legend wrote itself. What is true Space Invaders was the first video game to cross into mainstream global consciousness. It inspired Shigeru Miyamoto to make games. Atari paid $2 million for the home console rights and sold 2 million Atari 2600 units on the back of that single title. It was the first killer app in the entire history of the medium. Taito built an American division in 1979, licensing partnerships with Midway, distribution deals across Europe, an international footprint built on one game. But the man who built that game had already been quietly moved out of the room where decisions were made. Nishikado continued working at Taito through the early 1980s, but the company had no framework for crediting individual designers. His contract required anonymity. The man who designed Space Invaders was invisible inside the company that owned it. In 1984, Michael Kogan died unexpectedly on a business trip. He was the founder, the engine, the person who had steered Taito through vodka and jukeboxes and the digital transition. His son Abraham took over as chairman. The company kept producing games, Bubble Bobble in 1986, Puzzle Bobble in 1994, but the center of gravity had shifted. The arcade market began contracting through the late 1980s and into the 1990s. Players who had once fed quarters into Taito's machines were buying home consoles and staying there. Taito America ceased operations in 1996. Taito Europe was liquidated in 1998. The international infrastructure built on Space Invaders was being dismantled piece by piece. That same year, Nishikado left Taito entirely. He founded his own small studio called Dreams, made games for various platforms, and eventually stepped back. The industry that he had done more than almost anyone else to create had moved on without him. By 2005, Taito was still operating, still sitting on one of the most valuable catalogs of arcade IP in history. That catalog was exactly what a much larger company wanted. In August 2005, Square Enix acquired Taito Corporation for approximately $564 million. They wanted two things: the arcade center business in Japan and the intellectual property. Space Invaders, Bubble Bobble, Arachnoid, half a century of games in a single transaction. The original Taito Corporation was dissolved into a shell company in 2006. The consumer games division was folded into Square Enix entirely by 2011. The company that exists today, bearing the Taito name, is an arcade operator and IP manager, running game centers across Japan and licensing the assets of a golden age it wasn't present for. The company Michael Kogan founded in 1953 is gone. What remains is the name. Tomohiro Nishikado is now 80 years old. He works as an executive advisor at the current Taito Corporation, a quiet return to the company whose name he made matter. In a recent interview, he described himself as terrible at video games. He said he was too preoccupied with building the machine to concern himself with what the game might become. Michael Kogan's name appears in almost no gaming history. The Ukrainian refugee who built a company from a vodka distillery and a pile of broken jukeboxes, who created the infrastructure that brought Space Invaders to the world, he is a footnote in a story that wouldn't exist without him. That's the pattern. The empires get remembered, the founders get forgotten. You now know how a refugees trading company became the spark that lit the golden age of arcade games, and how the man who built that spark was never once credited on the machine that made it happen. What you don't know yet is what Taito's success set in motion. The lines outside those Japanese arcades in 1978 caught the attention of a company already operating out of Chicago. They didn't make games, they distributed them, and they were about to become something much larger. That's next.